What if I told you that right now, in the shadows of global politics, four nations that barely exist on most people's radar are quietly coordinating what could become the blueprint for the next world war? We're not talking about the usual suspects here. This isn't Russia, China, or the United States making headlines. No, these are the ghost nations, countries so often overlooked that when they finally make their move, the world won't see it coming until it's way too late. And here's the wild part. They've already started positioning their pieces on the chessboard. The question isn't if this script gets activated anymore, it's when. And honestly, once you understand what these four countries are planning together, you'll never look at global stability the same way again. So who are we talking about? North Korea, Iran, Belarus, and Pakistan. Now I know what you're thinking. Some of these names you've heard before, but here's the thing. We've been so focused on the big players that we've completely missed how these four have been building something insane in the background. They're not superpowers individually, but together they form something way more dangerous. A coordinated network of chaos that can strike at the foundations of the current world order from multiple directions at once. And the scariest part? They've been meeting, planning, and synchronizing their capabilities for years, while everyone else was distracted. Let's break down why this alliance is so terrifying. North Korea brings nuclear weapons and a literally nothing-to-lose mentality. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz and has proxy forces scattered across the Middle East like a spider web. Belarus is essentially Russia's aircraft carrier in Europe, sitting right on NATO's doorstep. And Pakistan, often forgotten in these discussions, has over 170 nuclear warheads and borders both China and India, two giants who absolutely cannot stand each other. Put these four together and you've got a distributed threat system that can trigger conflicts on three continents simultaneously. That's not a regional crisis, that's a global nightmare. Here's where it gets crazy. The script these nations have developed isn't about winning a conventional war. They know they can't beat the United States or NATO in a straight fight. Instead, their strategy is about creating so much chaos in so many places at once that the global system just breaks. Think about it like this. What happens when you've got a nuclear crisis in Korea, oil supplies cut off from the Middle East, and a ground war in Eastern Europe all happening at the same time? The West can't respond to everything effectively. They have to choose. And the moment they choose, they lose somewhere else. The first move in this script would probably come from the most unpredictable player, North Korea. Imagine one morning, without any warning, North Korean forces surge across the DMZ in overwhelming numbers. We're talking about a military that's been preparing for this exact scenario for 70 years. They've got artillery positions that can hit Seoul, a city of 10 million people, within minutes. But here's what makes this different from past threats. This time, they're not bluffing, and they're not alone. The moment North Korea moves, Iran activates their part of the plan. Within hours of North Korea's attack, Iranian forces and their proxies launch a coordinated operation to close the Strait of Hormuz. They've been preparing for this forever. Seriously. They've got anti-ship missiles, mines, fast attack boats, and they know every inch of those waters. Suddenly, about 20% of the world's oil supply is cut off. Gas prices don't just spike, they absolutely explode. We're talking $10, maybe $15 a gallon within weeks. The global economy, which was already walking a tightrope, starts freaking out. Stock markets crash. Supply chains that barely recovered from the pandemic collapse again. But wait, it gets worse. While the world is scrambling to respond to Korea and the Strait of Hormuz, Belarus makes its move. With Russian support, or maybe even Russian troops wearing Belarusian uniforms, forces push into the Suwalki Gap, that tiny 60-mile corridor between Belarus and Kaliningrad. That's the only land connection between the Baltic states and the rest of NATO. This is the nightmare scenario that NATO planners lose sleep over. If that gap closes, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia are cut off. And here's the thing, NATO has to respond because that's Article 5 territory. But their forces are already stretched thin dealing with the other crises. Now here's where Pakistan's role becomes absolutely critical, and it's the part most people miss. Pakistan doesn't need to start a war with India. They just need to make India think they might. So as all this chaos unfolds, Pakistan starts mobilizing forces along the border, conducting missile tests, making aggressive statements. India, which already has a hair-trigger relationship with Pakistan, has no choice but to respond. They start mobilizing too. Suddenly, you've got two nuclear powers facing off with their fingers on the button, and neither can back down without looking weak. China's watching this whole thing and has to make calculations about what happens if India and Pakistan actually go at it. Do they intervene? Do they take advantage of India's distraction to push in the Himalayas? The United States and its allies are now facing an impossible situation. You've got active combat in Korea with American troops directly engaged. You've got a naval crisis in the Persian Gulf that threatens the global economy. You've got a potential Article 5 situation in Europe that could mean direct conflict with Russia. And you've got two nuclear powers in South Asia that might incinerate each other at any moment. There aren't enough carrier groups, there aren't enough troops, there aren't enough resources to handle all of this at once. The military has to prioritize, and whatever they don't prioritize becomes a win for the ghost nations. Let's game out what happens in each theater, because the details matter here. In Korea, even with American air superiority, the sheer volume of North Korean artillery would devastate Seoul in the first few hours. We're talking about tens of thousands of casualties before the sun sets on day one. US and South Korean forces would eventually push back, for sure, but it would take weeks or months of brutal fighting. And here's the kicker. The whole time, there's the threat of North Korea using tactical nuclear weapons if they start losing badly. Do you call that bluff? What if it's not a bluff? In the Middle East, the naval response to reopen the Strait of Hormuz would require a massive operation. You're talking mine-sweeping, suppressing Iranian coastal defenses, dealing with swarms of fast attack boats, and the whole time, Iranian proxies are attacking American bases and interests across the region. Hezbollah activates in Lebanon. Houthi rebels intensify attacks from Yemen. Iraqi militias hit American positions. It's not just one fight, it's 20 fights simultaneously. And the economic damage is already done. Even if the strait reopens in a month, the global economy has taken a hit that'll last for years. The European situation might actually be the most dangerous because it directly involves NATO and Russia. If Belarus, backed by Russia, actually moves into NATO territory, the alliance has to respond or it means nothing anymore. But a direct NATO-Russia conflict in 2025 is exponentially more dangerous than it would have been during the Cold War, because both sides have precision weapons, cyber capabilities, and doctrines that involve using tactical nuclear weapons early in a conflict. The risk of escalation is insane, and Russia knows that NATO is already overstretched, so they might calculate that the West will blink first. Here's what life looks like for regular people while all this is happening, and this is where it gets real. Gas prices make it impossible for a lot of people to get to work. Inflation goes absolutely crazy because global supply chains are in shambles. Food prices spike because modern agriculture depends on fuel and international trade. The stock market crashes, wiping out retirement accounts and savings. There are probably runs on banks in some places as people panic. Governments might implement rationing. There'd be lines for basic goods like we haven't seen since World War II. But the economic impacts are just the beginning. In the affected regions, we're talking about millions of refugees fleeing combat zones. South Korea alone could see millions trying to evacuate Seoul. The European refugee crisis from 2015 would look tiny compared to what happens if there's active warfare on NATO's eastern border. And where do these people go? The political tensions from refugee flows would tear at the fabric of the countries receiving them, especially when those countries are already dealing with economic crisis. The psychological impact would be massive too. For the first time since the end of the Cold War, people in Western countries would genuinely fear that nuclear war might happen. Not as some abstract possibility, but as something that could occur this week. That changes everything about how people think and act. Consumer behavior shifts dramatically. Political extremism increases as people look for someone to blame or someone who promises to fix it. Social cohesion breaks down as communities fracture under stress. Now here's the really wild part. This script doesn't require the ghost nations to win militarily. They just need to hold out long enough for the system to crack. Think about it. How long can the United States maintain combat operations on 3 continents while the economy at home is collapsing? How long before NATO members start arguing about whether defending the Baltics is worth risking nuclear war? How long before South Korea decides that reunification under any terms is better than watching Seoul get destroyed? The ghost nations are betting that the answer is not very long. And there's another layer to this that's honestly terrifying when you think about it. China hasn't even entered this scenario yet, but they're watching everything. If the United States is bogged down in Korea, the Middle East, and Europe, what's stopping China from making a move on Taiwan? They've been preparing for that exact scenario for decades. The US Navy can't defend Taiwan if half its carriers are already committed to other theaters. This could be the moment China's been waiting for. And if China takes Taiwan while America is stretched thin elsewhere, the entire balance of power in Asia shifts permanently. Russia benefits even if they're not officially involved. Beyond supporting Belarus, they get to watch NATO struggle, they get to see the United States exhausted and economically damaged, and they maintain plausible deniability the whole time. Iran gets to establish itself as the dominant power in the Middle East, while America is distracted. North Korea potentially achieves its goal of reunification, or at least severely damages South Korea's ability to resist. Pakistan shifts the balance of power in South Asia. Every ghost nation comes out ahead, even if they don't achieve total victory, because they've fundamentally changed the global order. The really crazy thing is that pieces of this script are already visible if you know where to look. North Korea has been testing increasingly sophisticated missiles. Iran has been hardening its position and expanding its proxy networks. Belarus has become even more aligned with Russia, especially after 2020. Pakistan has been walking a tightrope between the West and China while maintaining its nuclear arsenal. The coordination might not be formal or public, but the interests align perfectly. These four countries all benefit from the same outcome: a world where American power is diminished and they have more freedom to act in their regions. So what stops this from happening? Honestly, the main thing is that it's incredibly risky for everyone involved. North Korea would face potential annihilation. Iran would face massive retaliation. Belarus would become a battlefield. Pakistan could end up in a nuclear exchange with India. But here's the thing about desperate or revisionist powers. They calculate risk differently. If North Korea's leadership thinks the current trajectory leads to their eventual collapse anyway, why not roll the dice? If Iran believes that Western pressure will only increase, why not act while they still can? If these nations genuinely believe their survival or ambitions require changing the current system, the risks might seem worth it. The Ghost Nations script for World War III isn't about conquest in the traditional sense. It's about breaking the current system so completely that what comes after has to be different. It's about creating so much chaos that the rules get rewritten. And the terrifying part is that it doesn't require these four nations to be stronger than the West. It just requires them to be willing to inflict enough damage that the cost of maintaining the current order becomes unbearable. They're betting that democracies, with their free press and elections and public opinion, will crack under pressure before authoritarian regimes will. They might be right. Look, the scenario we've walked through here might never happen exactly like this. There are 1,000 variables that could change the calculation. But the underlying dynamic is real. These four ghost nations have interests that align, capabilities that complement each other, and motivations to challenge the current world order. They've been watching how the West responds to crises, learning the lessons, identifying the weaknesses. And in a world that's more unstable than it's been in decades, with great power competition heating up and global institutions weakening, the possibility that they might actually try something like this isn't crazy. It's just uncomfortable to think about. The script is written. The only question is whether anyone will be brave enough, or desperate enough, or crazy enough to actually use it. And honestly, given everything happening in the world right now, that's not a bet any of us should feel comfortable making.